You think you just decided to read this? You didn't. Somewhere in the quiet machinery behind your eyes, a choice was already forming, cells firing, signals leaning toward yes, long before the feeling of deciding ever reached the part of you that feels like you. By the time you showed up to the moment, the work was finished, and you took the credit anyway. It feels obvious that you are the one in charge. You want to lift your hand, and it lifts. You decide to speak, and the words arrive. This is the most basic fact of being a person. There is a you in here, pulling the levers, steering the ship. But the real answer is far stranger than the smooth sense of control you carry around all day. What if the part of you that feels like the decider was never the decider at all? In the early 1980s, a scientist named Benjamin Libet sat people down in a lab and asked them to do something almost insultingly simple. Flick your wrist, whenever you feel like it. No right answer, no trick, just wait for the urge, then move. While they waited, Libet measured two things at once. He recorded the electrical activity of their brains, and he tracked a fast-moving dot on a clock so each person could mark the exact instant they felt the decision to move. Then he lined the two up. What he found quietly broke something. The brain begins preparing to move roughly 300 milliseconds, sometimes far more, before a person consciously feels the urge to do it. The command to flex the wrist was already traveling toward the muscles before the experience of choosing had even appeared. The decision came first. The feeling of deciding came second. The sensation of being the author was a kind of echo, arriving late to a thing that had already begun without it. Read that again. Your sense of choosing did not cause the action. It followed it. The comfortable response is to wave this away. It's a flick of the wrist. Who cares? Twitching a finger is not the same as choosing a career, a partner, a belief you would defend with your life. That's fair. But the truly unsettling part is what happened when scientists made the question bigger. In 2008, a neuroscientist named John Dylan Haynes ran a new version of the experiment inside a brain scanner. People lay in the machine and chose, freely, whether to press a button with their left hand or their right. A clean, genuine choice. Left or right. Entirely yours. Then Haynes asked a colder question. Could he predict the choice before the chooser knew it? He could. By reading patterns of activity in the front of the brain, his team could forecast which hand a person would use up to 7, sometimes 10, full seconds before that person felt they had decided. 10 seconds. That is not a reflex. That is enough time to stand up and pour a glass of water. The choice was already sitting there, fully formed in the tissue, long before it ever surfaced into the warm little spotlight you call me deciding. So, who decided? And when? To understand what your mind is really doing in these moments, you have to meet one of the strangest characters in all of neuroscience. A man named Michael Gazzaniga spent decades studying people whose brains had been surgically split in two. To stop violent seizures, surgeons had severed the thick bridge of fibers connecting the left and right halves of the brain. The two sides could no longer pass messages to each other, and that let Gazzaniga do something extraordinary. He could show information to one half of someone's brain that the other half would never see. Here is what he found. He would flash a silent instruction to the right side of the brain, a word like walk, and the person would stand up and begin walking. Then he would ask them out loud why they were getting up. Now, the talking, explaining part of the brain lives mostly on the left, and the left side had no idea about the walk command. It never received it. So, by every rule of logic, the person should have answered, I honestly don't know why I'm standing. But that is never what happened. Instead, without a flicker of hesitation, they would say something like, oh, I'm just going to grab a drink. They invented it. Instantly. Seamlessly. And here is the part that should stop you where you sit. They were not lying. They believed it completely. The left brain, confronted with a body already in motion for reasons it could not access, did the only thing it knows how to do. It wrote a story. It produced a reason that felt utterly true. Gazzaniga called this part of the mind the interpreter.
a built-in narrator whose entire job is to watch what your body is already doing and explain it back to you as a choice you made. Sit with that for a second. There is a part of your brain whose function is to take actions you did not consciously author and hand them back to you, wearing the mask of, "I decided this."
And you are doing it right now, not with a split brain, with your whole, intact one. Consider an experiment run by two researchers named Petter Johansson and Lars Hall. They showed people pairs of photographs of faces and asked a simple question: which one is more attractive? The person would point. Then the researchers handed over the chosen photo for a closer look and asked them to explain why they picked it, except sometimes, with a small sleight of hand, they swapped the photo. The person was now holding the face they had rejected and being asked to justify choosing it. You would expect them to notice. Most didn't. They looked at the wrong face, the one they had just turned down, and confidently explained why they had chosen it. I liked her smile. She seemed warmer. They built a fluent, detailed reason for a decision they never actually made. How sure are you, then, about the reasons behind your own choices? A psychologist named Daniel Wegener spent his career defending an idea that sounds impossible at first. He argued that the feeling of consciously willing your actions is not the cause of those actions at all. It is a feeling, a real, vivid, useful feeling. But it is assembled after the fact, the way you read a temperature off a thermostat you did not set. Your brain notices a thought, like "I'll check my phone," arriving just before an action, your hand already reaching, and from that timing it manufactures a powerful sensation. I made that happen. But the thought and the action can both be downstream of deeper processes you never glimpse. The sense of authorship is just your brain connecting two dots and signing your name beneath them. Think about how often you act first and explain yourself backward. You snap at someone, then build the reason a second later. They deserved it. You were tired. They started it. You choose the more expensive option and instantly know exactly why it was the smart, rational call. You feel pulled toward one stranger across a room, and your mind floods with reasons, none of which existed one heartbeat before the pull. How many of your reasons are reasons, and how many are stories told after the deciding was already done? Here is where it would be easy to spiral. If a choice forms in the dark, before you feel it, then maybe you are only a passenger. Maybe you are a puppet, watching hands move and pretending they are yours. But that thought smuggles in a hidden assumption. And the assumption is wrong. The assumption is that you are only the spotlight, that the real you is the small conscious watcher in the front row, and everything happening in the dark is some other thing, deciding on your behalf. It isn't. The brain that began leaning left or right 10 seconds early is not a stranger. It is not an intruder who hijacked your body. It is you, the part that weighed the options before you felt it. You. The interpreter spinning your reasons. You. The deep hum of memory and fear and preference that tilts a choice before it ever reaches words. That is the oldest, truest, most genuinely yours part of all of it. You were never just the spotlight. You are the entire theater. The spotlight is only the last place where the decision becomes visible to itself. The strange experiments do not prove you have no self. They prove yourself is enormously larger than the thin beam of awareness you keep mistaking for the whole of you. So why would a brain be built this way? Why hide the deciding and show you only the highlight reel, stamped with a comforting feeling of control? Because the feeling earns its keep. For your ancestors, hesitation could be fatal. A creature that stopped to consciously deliberate every flinch and step and reach would be a slow creature, and slow creatures fed the fast ones. So, evolution did something elegant. It pushed the heavy machinery of decision down into fast, automatic, below-the-surface systems, and then it handed you a simplified readout, a sense of ownership, just rich enough to plan, to learn, to tell the others in your tribe what you will do tomorrow. The conscious feeling of choice is not a cruel trick. It is an interface. It is the dashboard, not the engine. You do not see the millions of computations under the hood. You see one needle,
and a hand on the wheel, and the steady sense that the hand belongs to you. And in the way that matters most, it does.
So tomorrow morning, when you reach for your phone before your eyes are even fully open, watch the order of things. The reach comes first. The reason comes after. The "I just wanted to check something" arrives a half-second late, dressed as a decision, when really your hand was already moving on a current set in motion long before you woke up enough to claim it. This is not a reason to despair. It is almost the opposite. If the choosing happens in deep water and the spotlight always arrives late, then the most powerful thing you can do is stop straining so hard inside the spotlight. Shape the water instead. The habits you build, the things you read, the people you stand near, the moves you practice until they sink beneath thought, those are the real levers. Because the version of you that decides in the dark is built, slowly, out of everything you allow in. You do not control the choice in the instant it happens. But across a lifetime, you build the one who chooses. That is a kind of freedom the spotlight never had. You think you just decided to read this, and maybe the truth is gentler than it first sounded. The decision was already made before you ever showed up to feel it. And the quiet miracle is not that you took the credit. It is that the one who decided in the dark and the one who stepped into the light to claim it were the same person all along.